feel the beat.
I don't know who, somebody need to hear this. Y'all don't speak Hebrew, that's Yiddish. How the fuck you try to label us anti-Semitic? We the Israelites, blacks and native Hispanics. The Germans getting locked up for the Holocaust. Meanwhile, black people still up in the Holocaust. 100 million of us died in the transatlantic. 6 million died, y'all want the world to never forget it. You can never be a Jew, you a Ashkenaz. This ain't a star dum-dum, a gun die or die. Yeah, Yeezy told the truth and got ostracized. Not one person in the Bible had on a yarmulke. We was slaves in America like we was in Egypt. Y'all don't even fit the curses in the Torah neither. Y'all was blind to the truth, I had to make it clear. How Jerusalem, your land, your people came from Europe. That was 1947, your menorah got 9 sticks, it's really only 7. Yeah, it's us against the world, Armageddon. This what happened when you inherit lies from your ancestors. Y'all the synagogue of Satan with them black hats. Your whole nation sitting ducks, Aflacs. Bunch of thieves and culture vultures, ain't nothing kosher. To tell the truth, you vagabonds don't have a culture. Macedonia, Alexander and Philip, you a convert, so tell me, how the fuck is you Israel? That don't make you the people just cause you litter. Why my people can't hate your people like y'all hate Hitler? All the prophets was black and was called nigga. Y'all don't even fit the description that's in the scriptures. Abraham all the way down to Jacob, we the real Jews. Y'all don't study Christ, y'all follow the Talmud. Keep it real, yeah, let's keep it real. Cold hard truth, it give you chills. Say y'all Jewish cause y'all ain't really them. About to do them like Hammond, it's the Feast of Purim. U.P.K undefeated, this an easy win. We was born fighting, y'all the evil twin. Jacob took hold of his heel, then out came his little red bastard and they kosher deals. It's only 12 tribes, y'all trying to make it 13. Esau despised his birthright, the Lord cursed him. He ain't the devil, who is? I'm still searching. Ask your rabbi, why he get them babies herpes? I don't know what's worse, that or you claiming that you a Maccabee. I'm about to cancel, everybody try to cancel ye. I ain't afraid to speak, this what I do. They riding to the core, I'm just judging them by their fruit. Cause they ain't suffering curses. If I was carnal, I promise I'd punch you in person. I know this an uncomfortable subject. They making millions off our culture and black people suffering from it. Yeah, they don't believe in Christ, they the Antichrist. Make a living off of niggas, they a parasite. I ain't afraid to tell the truth, niggas terrified. I'm about to go DEFCON 4, I ain't satisfied.
That is proof, that is absolute proof that they know we are the real Jews. That's absolute proof. Now you got the records. Go find me a white Jew on any archaeology in Egypt anywhere. You will never find a piece of archaeology with white people as slaves in Egypt. So don't tell me that they were slaves and it's their identity, and they know it. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not. The Lord knows the blasphemy of you so-called white people that say you are Jews and you are not Jews. You are not the people of the law. You are not God's chosen people. God's chosen people are living in the ghettos of America. God's chosen people are in poverty and depression in the streets of America. God's chosen people are walking around in America with no identity. That's where God... Yeah, those are messed up, no. Bad news is to beat your home, nigga. Yeah. Go on, get on that ass real quick one time. 144, baby. Run that shit up, Trey.
They said you get on, you gon' represent. I said, of course. Soon as they crank that beat, I ride that bitch just like a horse. She about to go dumb, yeah, bitch, me whole car. You ain't know they call me Obi-Wan. I come with the force. You gon' ride, yeah, of course. Get it lit up like a torch. You even low on this Lord, so that bitch is either or. Yeah, I know them niggas ain't cut like that. I swear I'm to our core. Wait up, let me make a call right quick. I'ma start another war. I was hurting when she left, but I don't care about any more. I need a Vaseline like my Nina Puffer bar. Took a Zoc, watch the dark. Matter of fact, lock the door. Any problem, let them come. We gon' snatch they soul like Shang Tsung. Put them out of service, keep them tools like Miss Hopper Free. Try to hold me, it's way too late. I'm headed straight to the safe. Throw that one up like a trophy. I'm that nigga, ain't no debate. Told them boys we taking over. Call them up like set the date. This shit a piece of cake. Yeah, my bitches came from Whole Foods. Told them put on that top 3. Then bring me my house shoes. Don't make excuses, make moves. These niggas ungrateful, gotta show them U.P.K rules. I'm making hits like I can't lose. They said you get on, you gon' represent. I said of course. Soon as they crank that beat, I
one West in I place once more. Yeah, easy. You wanna know where I come from? You wanna know where I come from? I believe. You wanna know where I come from? I don't want the Middle East, but y'all out the West one get the kid peace. Me tip over to pretty Christine. A big broad smile and giggling teeth. Have a brand new 4-5 pretty crisp clean. We deal with the chica press pretty pristine. Them say them bad but we no intrigue. If you this now you top then killing increase. And we no join both sides. One West are the best you fi know boy. You put a S on your chest when the chrome pint. Every bone a broke we left lone tribe. Make a force right boy if you know your size. Don't see me on the street on a 4-5. You get ratchet knife in your throat pipe. Man who make your chop flesh like your ghost rise. Give up the ghost. Make it both wife. Y'all shut up, bend over, pan to a pint. Fuck you, make you get wet like a boat ride. If you hold tight, y'all, me a hold tight. Alright, no later, then more time. Me have things to do, but got more fight. Look you at the nanny, girl, do a bright. Play we shoot the bumbo clad, you grind. That's where me come from. I don't want the Middle East, but y'all out the West one get the kid piece. Me step over to pretty Christine. A big broad smile and giggling teeth. Have a brand new 4-5 pretty crisp clean. We deal with the chica press pretty pristine. Them say them bad but we no intrigue. If you this now you talk then yeah, them do bad, just mouth them up, just slogan. You could have big and tough like Hulk Hogan. You get your own a bag, you get total. Send your soul to God, their best no God. The whole fucking clip of your own that. No come set, no chop for your own bat. I go get sent off a run postal. Get a PO box. She say me handsome, she want hold me cocky at ransom. She want hood fi broke, she want yam some. She say breed me, give me that one son boy. We have shotgun, we have Remington, we have Magnum. So if a beef you want, you can have some. Anything we come turn in a phantom. And where we come from, I don't want the Middle East, but y'all out the West one get the kid piece. Me step over to pretty Christine. A big broad smile and giggling teeth. Have a brand new 4-5 pretty crisp clean. We deal with the chica press pretty pristine. Them say them bad but we no intrigue. If you this now you talk then killing increase. You know,
Hey, Shalom, Yabashim Shabakatam, to all the brothers, Yabashim Malatam, Bashim Yawashai, to all the sisters. Let me just fix this real quick. What's going on? Give me 1 second so I can fix the layout. Good night. Y'all bear with me for a second, Baba Kusha. Why is the layout like this? Salaki, y'all bear with me one moment. Well, if that's the case, we'll rock it out like that for now. Yabashim Shabakatam, to all the brothers, Yabashim Malatam, Bashim Yawashai, to all the sisters, and priest and officer 500 Baraki Allah with the I.S.U.P.K, which stands for the Israelite School of Universal and Practical Knowledge, started out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under commanding John YAHANNA. Since 1969, we've been teaching the truth about the scriptures, the identity of a people that lost everything they had, which is their culture, their language. You understand? Their identity, their customs, their land, which are the 12 tribes of Israel, the so-called Blacks, Latinos, and Native American Indians, who are really the true biblical Jews of antiquity. And today's the second part of last week's class. Last Monday was the day of reconciliation, of truth and reconciliation, where since 2023, right, the government of Canada is quote unquote apologizing for their role in the residential schools whatsoever. Really is just a spit in the face of the so-called Indigenous community. Why? Because instead of apologizing, why are they not giving them the land back? And even the so-called apology of being recognized and bringing awareness to the role that they had in the residential schools in abusing these Native children, what is this apology going to do to them? It can't take back years of oppression. It can't take back years of abuse whatsoever, right? So what are they achieving? Nothing. It's really a laugh in their face. You understand? And we're really going to get into more of the history of the residential schools today than last week. Last week we got into why were they, when did they come about on the day of truth and reconciliation whatsoever. The truth is, right, that so-called Native American Indians are the tribe of Gad. And how can our oppressor reconcile? Well, he's not going to do anything. We're never going to get the land back. We're never going to get reparations. The Most High will send Christ to get it back in blood. It's that simple. You understand? And we're going to see, we're going to give more of a breakdown of the residential schools, how it was set up. We're even going to give you the name of the residential school that had a how you call it? That had an electric chair in their basement. You understand? So they made the electric chair themselves, and they were using it for apparently punishment and for sport, meaning for fun, right? We're going to get into that right now. Anyone who wants to be part of the school, click on the signing and sign out links in the chat, as well as for those who are on TikTok on I.S.U.P.K Toronto, y'all could go directly to our YouTube channel if you want to see the articles that we're sharing, all right? So let's go right there right now. Give me one moment. Let's turn to the history of these residential schools. This is from the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada.ca. Here's the thing. Contrary to the US, you can't, Canadians are not openly proud about their history, meaning it's taboo to speak about such, right? Contrary to the US, who's really proud of their violent and disgusting past. You understand? Give me 1 second. Salake. So contrary to the US, who's really proud of their violent past, Canada really likes to sweep it under the rug, right? Like to sweep it under the rug. They'd like to not talk about it. It's all in the past. Say it's all in the past whatsoever. They don't want to talk about slavery as if it never existed in Canada, when 2/3 of the slaves were actually Indigenous in Canada. 2/3 of the slaves were Native Indians. Only 1/3 was Black. Then they're not talking about the history of residential schools, which we're getting into today. Let me zoom in a bit. There you go. So residential schools operated in Canada for more than 160 years, with upwards of 150,000 children passing through their doors. Every province and territory, with the exception of Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, and New Brunswick, was home to the federally funded church-run schools. Meaning what? The government of Canada was funding these residential schools, was funding the church to run and operate these schools. You understand? which you call it residential schools, boarding schools, however you want to call it, is damn near a concentration camp, right? And we'll see what they were doing at these residential schools. The last school closed in Saskatchewan in 1996. And as a matter of fact, the last school, really, I'm going to tell you right now where it closed. The last school that was closed was actually in 1997 in Rankin Inlet, which is up north when they have the so-called Inuits, right? So these schools were operating really from slavery, from the 1600s, as early as the 1600s, unofficially, up until 1997. So First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children were removed often against their will, which really is most of the time, especially after they made it legal for the RCMP, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, right? To remove so-called Indigenous children from the reservations, from their families. You understand? From their families and communities, and put into schools where they were forced to abandon their traditions, cultural practices, and languages. The residential school system was just one tool in a broader plan of aggressive assimilation and colonization of Indigenous peoples and territories in Canada. Why? Because this is the same as integration. You understand? In a sense where when you integrate within the people, you're going to integrate within their culture. You're not going to share cultures. You're going to either let go of your culture and adopt theirs, or they're going to let go of their culture and adopt yours. You can't mix the two of them together, which is the same as integration with Martin Luther King. And this is what happened during the time of the residential schools, which a lot of you know as the 60 scoop, right? Which is a term that was coined later on. But what you call integration, to try to make them integrate, right, within the Canadian society, or however they called it, is really assimilation. There is no such thing as integration. Assimilation, which is a part of colonization. You understand? And they coined a term during the time of these residential schools. They call it to kill the Indian in the child. Why? So that really they're not talking about physically, even though it really physically happened as well. We're talking about spiritually, where they can't identify themselves as who they are anymore. Now they're Canadians. But here's something interesting, right? There's this book right here. I have the French version with me. You understand? I gave the English version. I gifted the English version to one of my brothers in the UK, Sedam Gabar. This book, which translate, it says Peau Noire, Masque Blanc, which translate to Black Skin, White Mask by France Fanon, right? Is an interesting book to read. Is a good book to read. So y'all could understand that regardless of how much you try to assimilate, how much try to integrate, which is just assimilation, right? You will never be a human first to the people that you integrate with, in their society, whatever the case is in their mind. No, you will always be a nigger first. You will always be a spick first. You will always be a savage before you are ever considered a human. You understand? That's something to keep in mind. You can read that in the book. Again, which is recommended. You could order the English version on Amazon. Black Skin, White Masks. All right. But let's get back to it. So while the federal residential school system began around 1883, the origins of the residential school system can be traced to as early as 1830s. And they're only talking about officially, right? You're going to see why. Long before Confederation in 1867, when the Anglican Church established a residential school in Brantford, Ontario, which they claim was the first, To this point, churches had built schools specifically for indigenous children since the mid-1600s. Ever since slavery, there were residential schools, right? And when they say as early as 1830s, keep in mind, Canada abolished slavery, what, in 1834? No, 1835. You understand? So they were still having some remnants of slavery. Even till today, we're still enslaved. Blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans are not free. You understand? But as early as the mid-1600s, there were always schools specifically for indigenous children, specifically to abuse them to the point where they destroy them physically to destroy them spiritually. And I'm not even talking about those ones that they murdered and buried under the schools or on the school's ground. We're talking about the victims who are still alive today. Damn near every indigenous person you meet is a victim, is the child of a victim, or the grandchild of a victim of the residential school system. You understand? And that is not even to exaggerate. Because even though, as we're going to read down further down the line, that yes, parents try to prevent their kids from going there, laws were put in place not only to snatch the kids, they were coercing the parents into giving the kids away. Literally, they made it legal to kidnap children. Who did? Our oppressor, the goddamn devil the Bible speaks of, the white man. The Canadian government made it legal in 1894, as we've seen last week, for the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, to seize children from reserves, right, and to bring them into residential schools. So 50 years after the abolition, after slavery was abolished in Canada, they made it legal. And then when the parents, as we seen last week, I'm just giving you a reminder, as the parents were trying to prevent their kids from going over there or from taking them away from the residential schools, they then created a pass system, which was banning indigenous people from leaving their reservation without a pass from an Indian agent. Who did that again? The goddamn devil the Bible speaks of, the white man. You understand? Let's keep reading. Through this early period, these mission schools were primarily located in Eastern Canada, but as missions and colonial efforts moved west of the Great Lakes, so did the schools. The Canadian government and Canada's churches built the residential school system as a means to resolve the Indian question in Canada. The perceived threat and barrier posed by Indigenous peoples to the ongoing construction of the newly forming nation of Canada. They developed a system that mimicked schools in the US and in British colonies, where governments and colonial powers used large boarding-style industrial schools to convert masses of Indigenous and poor children into Catholics and Protestants and turn them into good industrious workers. Really talking about slaves. Workers. See, listen, the white man trying to make everything sound good or not as bad. What was a good industrious worker during the 1600s? You understand? A slave. But this is what they label us. They said, we're going to convert these savages, we're going to convert these people who are not educated, right? These poor people, these indigenous children, to good industrious workers. All it says is that they were making good slaves. That's it. That was the sole purpose of the residential schools. Because our oppressor is the devil the Bible speaks of. Devil meaning deceiver. Like, if these schools were opened from early 1600s, why label them as workers? And again, just like during slavery, right? They took example on the British colonies and other colonies outside of Canada, which were in the Caribbean. You're going to find another term for residential school is actually industrial school, which is the exact same thing, right? Once again, let me share this article with y'all. So as you can see right here, residential schools or industrial schools were government-run religious schools that permitted the kidnapping of indigenous children from their families to assimilate them to Euro-Canadian society. That's all it was. An industrial school is a residential school. And again, it was government-run religious schools, meaning what? Both the government and the church had a hand in it. Both of them. It's not like saying, well, the system is wicked and this and that. Listen, the church ran these schools and the government funded these schools. You can't go around that. You understand? Hey, Shalom, Kodash, Yabash, Shabakatat, well, for tuning in. Both these schools were run by our oppressor at the end of the day, whether it was the church or the Canadian government. They allowed it, right? Let's read down further and then go to the next article. Give me 1 second. So see how our oppressor is a goddamn devil? In this article, what does it say? By the way, Kodash, if you want to see the articles we're sharing, you could go directly to the YouTube channel, or anyone, as a matter of fact, on the TikTok, could go to I.S.U.P.K Toronto or Montreal YouTube channel to see the articles we're sharing, right, on the screen. So right there, it says, originally, the residential school system focused on industrial labor schools and farm schools. That's a goddamn lie. What do you mean a labor school and farm school to teach the children how to work? If they were open since the 1600, and keeping in mind that 2/3 of the slaves in Canada, because yes, again, Canada had slaves as well. 2/3 of the slaves were indigenous or so-called natives. You're not here to teach them anything. You understand? That's number one. Number two, why was all the abuse going on if it's supposed to be a school where they learn how to farm, they learn how to labor? And you're not going to teach. And again, just so that our oppressor is the devil, that he's a liar. Who taught the oppressor how to survive over here? The natives. How? They taught them how to farm. So how are you going to teach the farmer how to farm? How does that make sense? It really doesn't. Our oppressor, again, even though this information is available because they cannot hide it anymore, especially after the scandal of finding thousands of corpses on residential school grounds, they're always going to try to sugarcoat it. Because originally, they never came to the Americas, to the Caribbean, with any type of good intention. What good intention they had to? What was the purpose of enslaving us? What was their good intention? They had none. You understand? So when they say that they focus, that originally the focus was really on labor schools and farm schools, you're not going to teach the farmer who taught you how to farm. Our oppressor is a goddamn monster. You understand? And we'll never find the truth outside the I.S.U.P.K. Because we know they slaughtered the Native American Indians all throughout North America. They slaughtered the indigenous people of Central and South America as well, and the Caribbean. You understand? Let's keep reading. By 1900, there were 22 industrial schools and 39 residential schools in Canada. Keep in mind, they're trying to make a distinction, but it's the exact same thing. In 1931, at its peak, there were 80 schools in operation. And while most of them would be called residential schools, They often maintain industrial work through large gardens, barns, workshops, and sewing rooms. Catholic and Protestant churches provided much of the original direction on where schools would be placed and how school systems would grow. Basically, the church was just in charge of the curriculum. The government was just funding the church. Government Indian agents and officials from a wide variety of different departments played a central role in the development and maintenance of the residential school system. Many of the first schools were built close to existing school missions. We're going to switch to the other article, right? Because right now it's just basically telling you that how these schools were set up, whatever the case is. Give me 1 second. Let's go a bit deeper into the Canadian residential school system, which a lot of it was modeled after in other industrial schools in the Caribbean. Again, as you can see right here, it says the Canadian Indian residential school system, right, was a network of boarding schools for Indigenous peoples. Call it whatever you want. Today's boarding schools are what? You understand? I mean, back in the days, the boarding schools were the residential schools, which really were open till 1997. The network was funded by the Canadian government's Department of Indian Affairs and administered by various Christian churches. Listen, they had a whole department on how to deal with our Native American Indian brothers and sisters. They have a whole branch on how to deal with them. Just like they have, you know, what you call it in Mississippi, they had that those 3 or 5 police officers. They had a whole goon squad specifically for Black people. Well, guess what? The Canadian government, just like the United States government, they have a whole department on how to deal with Gadites, on how to deal with Native Americans. And it's not new. It's not from today. It's been going on, right? The school system was created to isolate Indigenous children from the influence of their own culture and religion in order to assimilate them into the dominant Euro-Canadian culture. Again, they're just stripping you off of your culture and then making you white. But like previously mentioned, the book I recommended to y'all, right, because Kodash was not there earlier, Black Skin, White Masks. You understand? Black Skin, White Masks. Y'all could get the book on Amazon, right? It will tell you, no matter how assimilated you are in this society, you will always be a nigga first. You will always be what you are first before you're a human being, especially to the eyes of our oppressor. You understand? Even if you adopt their culture, you speak their language, you follow their traditions and religions, you're just a French-speaking nigga. You're an English-speaking savage. You're a Spanish-speaking spick. That's it. And then you're a human being. But even as a human being, during slavery, even as human beings, we were 3/5 of a man. Always keep that in mind, especially when you want to say God loves everybody and we should love our oppressor. We should never love our oppressor. Just like the zebra should never love the lion, any prey should never love its predator. You'll look at that prey like something's wrong in their head. Guess what? Something's wrong in our head. Something's wrong. The thing that the Native Indian community waited what? Since that day has been only observed since 2023. To be recognized, to bring awareness to what? It's not like Canada doesn't know their history. They know how they got Canada. But we think we achieved something. We think maybe it's a step to getting the land back. It's a step. They're starting to apologize. They're starting to recognize us. We have the whole day. Well, guess what? Let's go to Lamentations 4:17 real quick. which says, as for us, our eyes as yet failed for our vain help. In our watching, we watched for a nation that could not save us. Don't expect anything from these oppressors. Don't. We're not getting the land back. Again, we probably have to reiterate that every class, especially when talking about our Gadite brothers and sisters. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, you understand, whose government was funding the residential schools. So they know what was going on. They have the paperwork, right? Said, if he gets elected Prime Minister in 2017, he'll provide clean drinking water to the reservations. Well, we are in 2024, 7 years later, not one drop of clean water provided to the reservations. But you will see the trucks cleaning the streets of Montreal, cleaning the streets of Toronto, spraying water everywhere, watering all the plants. And that clean, and they use clean water for that. Guess what? That clean water could have been provided to the Indian reservations. Stop thinking that, you know, we're a step closer to being accepted. We're a step closer to being recognized. We're not. Ever. The Pope came to Canada, what, last year, 2 years ago? A chief, I forgot of which tribe, gave the Pope a headpiece. You see the headpiece with the feathers? He gave him a headpiece. He came to apologies for what? Haven't y'all seen, like, even on records, as we're going to read down the article, on record, it says that between 3,200 and 6,000 children died on these residential schools. And that's only the one they have on record, because just like during slavery, especially in the states up north and in Canada as well, in colder areas, if you were probably left in the, you were left a lot of times in the wilderness for the animals to eat you. Wolves eat bones. Bears eat bones. There is no remains left. And as they control the records, they could just literally erase you off of the census. Your family know you existed. Your mom knows, she pushed you out. She carried you for 9 months, she pushed you out. But on record, you never existed. And there's no remains to find. What makes you think that you're going to achieve something or expect anything from this monstrous bastard of a white man? You're not. You understand? It's damn near like you're watching these people as your power. They do have power over you because you're not trusting in your power. This is the same reason we're going to make a few history classes on that in the coming weeks. The same reason we go back to slavery all the time. Why? Because we follow after these nations, we take on their culture and worship their gods. Therefore, the Most High is not with us. The Most High is not with us because we turn our back on him. The Most High is not turning his back on us. We're turning our back on the Most High, which is why we're in the ghettos, why we're in the barrios, why we're in the favelas, why we're on reservations. That's why. Because we turn our back on the Most High and we decide to follow these other nations. We decide to still try and integrate this Caucasian society. You understand? We still try to integrate them when integration is really assimilation. They don't have to do it for us anymore. It has come to a day and age where we're willingly trying to integrate their society. Like, they beat us so bad that we don't resist anymore. We don't. Our people are so tired of fighting, they have no fight left. So nobody can fight for them. That's what they think. When in reality, the men of the Lord in the I.S.U.P.K under Commandant General YAHANNA fight for our people. We speak out for our people. We are the voice of the voiceless. We are the strength of the weak. You understand? And nowhere else. But let's get back to this article, right? Might have to do a part 3, as a matter of fact, but let's see if we could get back to the article. Anyone that any question or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. Give me 1 second. So as we read right here again, around 150,000 children were placed. Around 150,000 were placed in residential schools nationally. We're only talking about Canada. We're not even talking about those in the US, which is not better, right? But Canada, people need to stop having this misconception that Canada is like the Switzerland of North America. Canada is as bloody as the US. They just don't openly talk about their history like the US does. That's it. And when it says around 150,000, knowing how oppressor always sugarcoats facts about his criminal activities, it's way more than 150,000 children that attended these schools. And they're only talking about those that they had on the census. Imagine those they erased from the census, literally, and that the remains you can't find. By the 1930s, about 30% of indigenous children were attending residential schools. 30% is a big number. The number of school-related deaths remain unknown due to incomplete records. Meaning what? If you die, you are not put on the record where you have to register your death. You're probably not even put on the attendance records anymore. You're gone somewhere. You just disappeared. Where? A lot of them in the wilderness, eaten by wolves and bears. A lot of them were just buried on school grounds, which is why people started really talking about it. Why? Because you can't hide the bodies. They went to excavate the school grounds and they found remains of thousands of children. They started wondering why. Well, guess what? Nobody cares about Blacks, Latinos, and Native American Indians outside the I.S.U.P.K. So even though our Gadite brothers and sisters been trying to voice their concern, to talk about their missing children, the oppressor doesn't care. He's the one kidnapping the children. He made it legal in 1894 for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to kidnap those children. It was legal. Literally. Y'all can look it up. You understand? When the parents resisted the fact that their children had to go to residential schools, the government made school attendance compulsory, meaning it was an obligation for them to attend the school. In 1894, 50 years after the abolition, so like for my poor English, of slavery in Canada. No, so like 60 years, because it was abolished in 1834. And it was empowered, meaning they gave the power to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, to literally kidnap those children. Literally. The government made it legal to kidnap children in 1894. The number of school-related deaths remains unknown due to incomplete records. Estimates range from 3,200 to over 30,000. They're talking about the dead. You understand? To 30,000. And we're only talking about the dead from the residential schools. We're not even talking about those who fell from the genocides, those who fell from smallpox. We're talking about those who died during the residential school era, which ended in 1997. So while hip-hop is booming, the music industry, the golden age of hip-hop, our Gadite brothers and sisters were getting electrocuted in electric chairs in residential schools. For what? As a punishment and for sport, meaning for fun. Gadite children were getting beat half to death for peeing their bed. Guess what? Newsflash, it is normal for a child to pee their bed. It might happen. But they're literally getting electrocuted for that. If you don't believe it, here's the name of the exact residential school that did it, right? I'm going to give you the name right now. Let's go share this one. This is the St. Anne's Indian Residential School, which was a Canadian Indian residential school in Fort Albany, Ontario, that operated in 1902, from 1902 to 1976. It took Cree students from the Fort Albany First Nation and area. Many students reported physical, psychological, and sexual abuse, and 156 settled a lawsuit against the federal government in 2004, which really, they didn't settle anything. You understand? Because you can't take back those years of abuse. And out of all those children that attended this school, only 156 settled a lawsuit. While we know that there was abuse in every residential schools. You understand? Not only that, but when it comes to the abuse, whether it's physical, psychological, or sexual, they were literally sweeping it under the rug in the pretense where the church knows better. The church knows better. You don't know better. How can you know better? You're uneducated. You're a savage. You're a nigga. You don't know better. You don't know how the Canadian government operates because you haven't been assimilated to Canadian society. So they know better and you don't. You understand? Now, real quick, we're going to go, let me drop down. There you go. So many former students of St. Anne's describe experiencing physical, psychological, and sexual abuse while at the school. Physical abuse came in many different forms, including poor living conditions and corporal punishments for students speaking in their native language. St. Anne's survivor, Edmund Metatawabin Salakia, claimed the school used an electric chair for punishment and sport. In the book Up Ghost River, if y'all want to go get the book of Edmund, go get it. It's called Up Ghost River. He's a survivor of that specific school, St. Anne's School in Ontario. He said they were using an electric chair for punishment and sport. They had fun electrocuting our Gadite brothers and sisters, children at that. Well, it really didn't matter if they were children or not. They were doing it for fun. And if y'all missed the atrocity class that we did, they always were making up games to torture us. And for them, it was fun. It was games. Christopher Columbus and his men were playing a game where they were trying to see who has the sharpest sword. And it's not a metaphor. They were swinging at our brothers and sisters, their swords. And whoever was hacking off a body part or a head with one swing would win. That's what we went through. Not every single nation was destroyed like we are. Not every single nation was treated like we were. You understand? Let's get Ezekiel real quick. Ezekiel 35. Y'all going to understand, right? I'm going to get Ezekiel 35 and Obadiah. Y'all need to understand that. Again, we say the white man is the devil. Our oppressor's going to pay for what they did to us. Y'all call us racist. Y'all call us all types of names. As if y'all don't like white people because they're white. You can't be like that. Listen, Bob Marley doesn't have the Caucasian complexion, but he is as much a devil as Eminem. It has nothing to do with your skin complexion or your blue eyes. You understand? Nothing at all. See, Obadiah 1 and 10. Obadiah chapter 1 verse 10 says, "For thy violence against thy brother Jacob." Why? Because in St. Anne's Residential School in Ontario, y'all were using an electric chair for children, not only for punishment and for sport. Why? Because Christopher Columbus and his men thought it was fun to see who has the sharpest sword by just practicing slicing and dicing Arawak Arawak people, Taino people, Caribbeans, because it was fun. Y'all had fun beating the slaves in public, whipping them till their back is so lacerated that okay, y'all see the movie with Will Smith, Emancipation? That's a true picture of the slave where his back was whipped. Well, guess what? Worse happened. That's just one of the only, probably the only picture you could see, but worse, way worse happened. They had journals where they were documenting the atrocities they were doing to us. And the more atrocious you were, the better. You understand? Let's keep reading. For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. Listen, you're gonna be eradicated. That's talking about the Caucasian race. You understand? Not only that, but when it says shame shall cover thee, what do you think it's taboo in Canada to speak about how Canada was found? You just can't hide the fact that they found thousands of bodies literally throughout the country on residential school grounds. And those bodies are children. They can't hide that. You don't hear about anything about Canada's dark past when it comes to slavery because they're trying to hide it. It's taboo to talk about slavery. White people can never talk about the crimes that they committed because shame is covering them. They can't openly admit that they are the most evil animal on the face of the earth. They can't. But they will. Let's get Ezekiel chapter 35, verse 5, real quick. Because thou hast had a perpetual hatred. Listen, they always hated us. This is not new. They always despised us. And they always will. Thou hast had a perpetual hatred and has shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity. You think, listen, why would you put a kid on an electric chair? For fun, for peeing their bed, for speaking their native tongue. It's not enough to beat them. It's not enough to make them disappear off the census, literally. It seemed like it wasn't enough to make it legal for the RCMP to kidnap the children of reservations. Y'all had to put these kids on electric chairs for fun. And then you ask yourself, why do every single nation despise you? You're surprised that how can anyone hate white people? We brought education to the world. We brought, we taught uneducated and ignorant civilizations. No, all y'all did is not only corrupt this world, this planet. Y'all are a virus even to the air. Y'all committed a genocide on the animals, on blacks, Latinos, Native Americans. Y'all destroyed the waterways, the airways, the plants. Listen, the tree in my backyard knows that you're the devil. The Bible speaks of it, that you're the cancer of the earth. The bugs know you're a cancer. But what matters the most to the Most High is that you shedded the blood of the children of Israel, his children. That's what matters the most. You understand? You put Gadite children on electric chairs in St. Anne's residential schools in Ontario. Not only for punishment, just for peeing their bed, just for having long hair, for having braids, just for being them, just for being Gadites, and for sport. Why? Because you thought it was funny to see a child being electrocuted on a chair. And that's the people that we're told to love today. That's the people that we're told to forgive and forget. Listen, we should never forgive our enemies when it comes to any other nation outside the nation of Israel. We should absolutely never forget. You understand? Let this be a reminder that these are the same people today making false promises, talking about they're going to provide clean drinking water, and 7 years later, there's still no clean drinking water. These are the same people. Right? Let's get back to the article. Someone has a question on the TikTok. Take cutting up. Just ask your question. Put your question in the chat. Again, St. Anne's survivor Edmund Metatawabin said he claimed that the school used an electric chair for punishment and sport. The electric chair was claimed to have been used between the mid-1950s and mid-1960s, according to police testimony. So like the police provided a testimony, like, yeah, you know what, during about 10 years, they were electrocuting kids over there for fun, apparently. Psychological abuse began with the act of taking the students who were small children away from their families. The abuse allegedly continued within the school. Many residential school survivors were also victims of sexual abuse in various forms. Right? We're going to start right here because we're really trying to show you about the electric chair, because the psychological, sexual, and physical abuse happening throughout Canada in every residential school. You understand? Let's get back to the article. So the system had its origins in laws enacted before Confederation, but it was primarily active from the passage of the Indian Act in 1876. Keep in mind that 20 years later, they made it legal for kidnapping to happen. Under Prime Minister Alexander Mackenzie, under Prime Minister John A. Macdonald, the government adopted the residential industrial school system of the United States, a partnership between the government and various church organizations. And if y'all telling us to go to church, to go pray to white Christ because he's going to save our souls, whatever the case is, and God loves everybody, well, apparently the church didn't get the memo, because the church who was running the schools and coming up with the curriculums on how to assimilate the Native Indian children were electrocuting these children in Ontario. I guess even the church, they didn't know that God loved everybody, I guess. Maybe they didn't know that. Or maybe they knew that it was nowhere to be found in the Bible. You understand? An amendment for the Indian Act in 1894 under Prime Minister Mackenzie Bowell made attendance at day schools, industrial schools, or residential schools, which is all the same, compulsory for First Nations children. And as we read last time, in 1894 is when not only they made it, they made it compulsory, meaning it was obligated for them to attend these schools, but they gave the power to the RCMP, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, to come and snatch these children from the reservations. If the parents said, no, you're not going to residential schools, for more than just one good reason, they gave the power to the police to snatch these children away from their parents. If the parents would try to come to get their kids from the residential schools, because a lot of them would not see their parents ever again. A lot of them wouldn't even have summer vacations, barely. Well, what they did is that they came with a pass system. The pass system prevents Indigenous people from leaving the reservation without a pass. So you see, like just in high school, some people have a hall pass to walk the hallways of high school, while they needed the Indian pass to walk outside the reservations. And that prevented them from ever getting their children from residential schools. Due to the remote nature of many communities, school locations meant that for some families, residential schools were the only way to comply. As we read earlier, right, in the other article, they strategically built schools closer to reservations, these residential schools closer to reservations, and they made it so that These are the closest schools because why? The reservation is too far for you to go to a regular school. So the closest option is the residential school. Unfortunately, they did that on purpose. The schools were intentionally located at substantial distances from indigenous communities to minimize contact between families and their children. Why? Because it's easy for the children to run away, to go home. It's easier for the parents to go get their children, right? Indian Commissioner Hader Reed, argued for schools at greater distances to reduce family visits, which he thought counteracted efforts to assimilate indigenous children, because the closer they are to their culture, it's going to be harder for them to abandon their culture, which was the whole purpose of the residential schools, besides the abuse, of course. Parental visits were further restricted by the use of a pass system designed to confine indigenous peoples to reserves. The last federally funded residential school, Cavalli Hall in Rankin Inlet, closed in 1997. Again, up until the late 90s, they had a residential schools open and operating. You understand? The residential school system harmed indigenous children significantly by removing them from their families, depriving them of their ancestral languages, and exposing them, many of them, to physical and sexual abuse. Conditions in the school led to student malnutrition, starvation, and disease. It's not just the condition of the school, right? One of the previous classes that we did, we had to show y'all that basically today's nutrition chart, they came up with that by starving natives in the residential schools on purpose. That's how they came up with, you know, how much nutrients you need a day, for instance. What happens when you don't brush your teeth, whatever the case is. What happens when you brush your teeth once a month, when you're only fed bread? What happens when some of them can drink milk, some of them cannot drink milk? What happens when we provide them vitamin B and the others no vitamins at all? They came up with the nutrition chart by experimenting on Native Indian children. Students were also subjected to forced enfranchisement as assimilated citizens that removed their legal identity as Indians. So you're going to find out that you see how you have the so-called Native Indian status. Listen, I'm going to show you how, good night, I'm going to show you how I oppress the goddamn devil. While they're removing the so-called Indian status of actual natives, you know what they're doing? They're paying $5 for them to be recognized as so-called natives. Who's them? Our oppressor is literally, that's what there's a term called $5 Indian. They paid $5 at the time so that they are legally recognized as natives. They are legally recognized as indigenous. A lot of these people owning the casinos are not even indigenous. They're $5 Indians or descent of $5 Indians. So while they're removing the identity of so-called native or indigenous people from actual First Nations, white people are just swooping in and paying a $5 fee so they recognize as natives. And these $5 Indians are the ones that quote unquote claim the benefits that no indigenous people have, really. There's no benefit in being stuck on a reservation. There's no benefit in not having access to clean drinking water. But the so-called benefits that they claim that the indigenous people have is $5 Indians who have them. Let's keep reading. We're going to go down a bit further, right? The system ultimately proved successful in disrupting the transmission of indigenous practices and beliefs across generations. The legacy of the system has been linked to an increased prevalence of post-traumatic stress, alcoholism, substance abuse, suicide, and intergenerational trauma which persists within indigenous communities today. This is more than true. If I go right now downtown in my city of Montreal, a lot of, well, all of them really, they live on the bridges. They're high on crack, and they get drunk all day long. Why? This is how much we're destroyed today. You understand? And all of them are victims, children of victims, or grandchildren of victims of these residential schools. And that's the reality of it. They're not crazy. They're not drug addicts. Nobody just, understand? It's not our nature to be intoxicated like that. You understand? Post-traumatic stress. Listen, indigenous people, they don't go to the doctor like that. You say black people don't have to go to the doctor? Well, guess what? Our Gadite brothers and sisters don't like to go to the doctor. Why? Because they were always experimenting on them. Matter of fact, one of the next classes we're going to make is all these experimentation that they did on us, such as, sterilizing us, removing, they were removing the uterus from Native American sisters. Literally. They make sure they can't reproduce. You understand? They don't go to the doctor. Why? Because they're afraid they're going to experiment on them again. They have a whole history of experimenting on them. That didn't just happen in the U.S. Listen, Canada has a history as dark as the U.S. Canada is not the beautiful Switzerland of North America where everybody is accepted and we're all joyful and we drink maple syrup. When it comes to Black, Latinos, and Native American Indians, Canada's past is as dark as the U.S. Again, the only difference is that the U.S. is so proud that they can openly talk about it. Canada is not as proud. Canada likes to make us forget. Justin Trudeau is saying, I'm going to give you clean water. He never did 7 years later. He's been prime minister for 7 years. He's telling the church, apologize. Tell you I'm sorry. While they're still committing crimes and they're still restricting natives in reservations. Good night. Just to add insult to injury, I brought that last week. I spoke to a Gadite sister, right? He said, when it comes to clean drinking water, there's a form they could fill to receive a compensation check of about $100 if they've been affected by the dirty water on the reservation. And they have a deadline to fill up the form and send it. Guess what? They could only do it once, because once you get the check, you cannot apply for it again, even if you're still affected by the dirty water. Even if there's still dirty water on the reservation, you can't get more compensation, which is just about $100 or so. Literally. Just to add insult to injury. So what is that excuse going to do? Listen, you're not going to get the land back from these people. The Most High, the God of the children of Israel, is sending Christ to come get him back in blood for you. You understand? Whether you like it or not. Really, you don't like it because of how miseducated and misinformed and destroyed we are, but the Bible is our book. It's not a white man's book. It's not a book of colonizer. It's the history, the historical record and moral code of so-called Blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans. The 12 tribes of Israel and no one else. Let's keep reading further down. Yeah, we're going to make a part 3 of the class. We're going to really get into the residential school system again. Let me drop down. So attempts to assimilate indigenous peoples were rooted in imperial colonialism, centered around European worldviews and cultural practices, and a concept of land ownership based on a discovery doctrine. Again, they claim they discovered America, so they had to bring these people up to speed, for lack of better words, on how to, be part of the empire that came to colonize America. As explained in the Executive Summary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada final report, underlying these arguments was the belief that the colonizers were bringing civilization to savage people who could never civilize themselves, a belief of racial and cultural superiority. Again, like I said, get y'all the book Black Skin, White Mask in English. Y'all gonna understand that before you were ever a human, you were a savage. Even today, before you're a human, you're a spick. Before you're a human, you're a nigga first. That's to every single nation on the face of the earth, especially the goddamn devil the Bible speaks of. Assimilation efforts began as early as the 17th century with the arrival of French missionaries in New France. For those who don't know, even though Canada is really an English country today, besides the province of Quebec, it first was colonized by the French before it came under British rule. Just like parts of America, right, were colonized by the French. It was part of New France before it became an English colony. They were resisted by indigenous communities who were unwilling to leave their children for extended periods. It was never having our children unsupervised was never our culture. You understand? They cannot just take our children away from us just like they're doing today. The establishment of day and boarding schools by groups, including the Recollets, Jesuits, and Ursulines, was largely abandoned by the 1690s. These groups are just Catholics and Christians. That's who they are. Right, let's keep going down a bit. Although many of these early schools were open for only a short time, efforts persisted. The Mohawk Institute Residential School, which is the oldest continuously operated residential school in Canada, opened in 1834. Just a reminder, that's when slavery was abolished, or a year before slavery was abolished in Canada, on 6 Nations of the Grand River near Brantford, Ontario, which they claim was the earliest residential school to operate officially. When they had named it residential schools, it was on paper. It operated under the government, ran by the church. They say that's the first one. But keep in mind, there were always schools specifically for indigenous children since the 1600s. So administered by the Anglican Church, the facility opened as the Mechanics Institute, a day school for boys, in 1828, and became a boarding school 4 years later when it accepted its first boarders and became admitting female students. It remained in operation until June 1970. A lot of y'all parents were born when these residential schools were still operating. A lot of your parents were born. A lot of us were born when these residential schools were still operating. Again, the last residential school closed in 97. You understand? Let's drop down a bit. Beginning in the late 1800s, the Canadian government's Department of Indian Affairs, the DIA, officially encouraged the growth of the residential school system as a valuable component in a wider policy of integrating indigenous people into European Canadian society. As you can see, they're going to interchangeably use the word integrating and assimilating, which is the exact same, because once you integrate in a society, right, it's really assimilation. You're going to give up your culture to adopt their culture, which is what they're doing. We're going to get to the part where they're saying basically their goal was to kill the Indian in the children so they could raise, as we've seen earlier, they said they were trying to raise good workers. Keep in mind that in the 1600s, a good worker was a good slave. The TRC found that the schools and the removal of children from their families amounted to cultural genocide. Which, again, our oppressor is a goddamn bastard, a devil, a monster. How are they going to say that only the schools amounted to cultural genocide when the whole quote unquote new world, right? The so-called discovery of the new world, the colonization of North, Central, and South America and the Caribbean, America was founded on a genocide. Every single city you have from North to Central, South America and the Caribbean is a city that's built on blood. We're literally on a graveyard. Not because people die every day of natural causes, because they slaughtered us. And those they were able to bury, they literally, probably under your building, there's 10 native Indian children. You understand? All these streets were paved on blood. Literally. I know specifically my city in Montreal was literally Mohawk territory. Nowadays, you see all these high-rising buildings. You have the Eaton Center in downtown Montreal, right? You have all these attractions and restaurants, all built on blood. Let's keep reading. The point is, the residential schools is not the only thing that could amount to a cultural genocide. You being here, interacting with these people already started the cultural genocide. From the moment that Christopher Columbus set sail, that was a cultural genocide, because once he landed, again, from the time that he landed in Hispaniola, he started slaughtering people. They brought the pox, they brought the smallpox, they brought all those diseases, knowing that these people would die. Then they played who has the sharpest swords by cutting people's head off for fun. Up until the 60s, the 1960s to 1970s, where they were putting kids on electric chairs in St. Anne in Ontario. This is our oppressor, a goddamn devil. A conclusion that echoed the words of historian John Malloy, who argued that system's aim was to kill the Indian in the child. They had no goal into making these children being able to assimilate in Canadian society. Well, really, that was the goal. To assimilate Canadian society, you had to kill the Indian in the child so that the children have no links or recollection of their culture. The only thing they know is how to be Canadian. Here's the thing. How are you a Canadian? Really? The same way you're an American. The exact same way. How are you an American? You commit genocide. That's how you're a Canadian. You commit genocide. You will never be Canadian. You will never be American. You will never be Colombian. You'll never be French. You'll never be whichever part of the empire you're trying to integrate. You will never be that. You understand? Ever. They're making good slaves. They're making you reject your culture. They're making you adopt their culture. And that should be a lesson learned for the nation of Israel, right? Because every time we got put into captivity, every time we had an issue with a nation and we were on the losing side because we adopted their culture. We sin against the Most High. We adopt the other nation's culture, and then the Most High turns his back on us. Well, guess what? It came to a point where we were forced to adopt other nations' culture. And the Most High was not here to save us. Why? Because we turned our backs on him. So now it's time to get back in the Most High God's favors. Right? It's time to get back on his good side. You understand? That's what time it is. It's time to come back to our culture of following these laws, statutes, and commandments. Stop dividing yourself between Cree tribes, Mohawks, Arawak, Taino, you understand, Dene, Gullah Geechee, whatever nonsense there is. Listen, you're a Gadite, you're a Benjamite, you're a Judite, you're Issacharite. And you will not be able to find out the truth outside the I.S.U.P.K. You understand? Even as we're reading through these articles, that is not that they're lying. Well, if they're not telling the whole truth, they're lying. There was more than 150,000 children in these residential schools. And as we see, listen, more than 6,000 probably were under these on school grounds. More than this, they say also more than 30,000. Listen, the numbers don't add up. And children keep disappearing today. You understand? We're running short on time. So yeah, we're definitely gonna make a part 3 next week. We're gonna get deeper into these into the history of residential schools. You understand? If you want to be part of the ISUPK, when you become part of the school, come click on these sign in and sign out links in the chat. Right? We're live on Mondays for the history class, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tuesday, tomorrow, we have the Brotherhood class in French, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're on I.S.U.P.K. Montreal. We have the law class Wednesday, same time. You understand? Taught by Officer 1000 Adiyar. And Thursday, we'll be back with our Brotherhood class in English, taught by myself once more, Officer 500 Barakiala. Right? With that said, we will see you next Monday for the third part of this history class on residential schools. Just know that our oppressor is a goddamn monster, that regardless of how you think you could forgive your oppressor, the Most High can't, and he won't. With that, I'm going to say Shalom, Shalom, Yahuwah, Hashem, Yashabrakatam to all the brothers, Yahweh Shemal, Tan, Bashem, Yahushua to all the sisters, and we'll see you next week. Shalom.